My sister called me broke at our family dinner in front of her most important client, humiliating me in a room full of successful relatives who already saw me as the family failure. 3 days later, that same client introduced me as the new CEO of the company my sister had been desperately trying to land a contract with, and I watched her face drain of all color as her entire world collapsed in real time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let me take you back to when everything seemed perfect on the surface, because that's what makes this betrayal so devastating. Growing up in Westfield Grove, a picture-perfect suburb outside Denver, I was Natalie Rivera, the younger sister who never quite measured up to the family's golden child. My older sister, Veronica Rivera-Sterling, was everything our parents had dreamed of: brilliant, ambitious, and ruthlessly successful in ways that made our entire extended family beam with pride. Veronica was 8 years older than me, which meant that by the time I was figuring out who I wanted to be, she had already established herself as the undisputed success story of our generation. While I was still in middle school struggling with algebra, she was graduating summa cum laude from Northwestern with a business degree. When I was learning to drive, she was already climbing the corporate ladder at Preston & Associates, one of Denver's most prestigious marketing firms. Our parents, Carmen and Eduardo Rivera, had built a comfortable life through decades of hard work. Dad owned 3 auto repair shops across the city, and Mom managed the business side of their operations. They weren't wealthy by Westfield Grove standards, but they were proud, hard-working people who had achieved the American dream through determination and sacrifice. More importantly, they had produced Veronica, who had exceeded every expectation they'd ever dared to have. The contrast between my sister and me became the defining narrative of every family gathering. Veronica would arrive in her pristine BMW, wearing designer clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who had never experienced failure. She'd regale everyone with stories of her latest business victories, the high-profile clients she was landing, the exclusive industry events she attended, and the 6-figure bonuses that allowed her to buy a stunning townhouse in the most expensive part of the city. Then there was me. After college, I had struggled to find my footing in the traditional corporate world. I'd bounced between several entry-level positions at different companies, never quite fitting into the cutthroat environment that seemed to energize Veronica. While she thrived on competition and office politics, I found myself drawn to more creative, collaborative approaches to problem-solving that didn't always align with corporate expectations. Eventually, I made the decision that would define how my family saw me for the next 5 years. I left my last corporate job to start freelancing as a digital strategy consultant, working primarily with small businesses and startups that couldn't afford the big marketing firms like Preston & Associates. I specialized in helping family-owned restaurants, local retail stores, and emerging tech companies develop their online presence and customer engagement strategies. The work was fulfilling in ways my corporate jobs had never been. I loved the variety, the creative challenges, and the satisfaction of helping small business owners achieve their dreams. I worked from my modest apartment in Riverside District, a trendy but affordable neighborhood that was home to artists, entrepreneurs, and young professionals who prioritized experiences over material possessions. But to my family, especially Veronica, my career choice looked like failure disguised as independence. While she was closing million-dollar deals with Fortune 500 companies, I was helping a family bakery improve their Instagram presence, or teaching a local bookstore owner how to build an email marketing campaign. While she was attending charity galas and networking events at exclusive country clubs, I was working late nights from my laptop, often in coffee shops or co-working spaces. The financial disparity between us was obvious and painful. Veronica's annual salary was more than I made in 3 years of freelancing. She owned property, drove luxury cars, and took elaborate vacations to European cities and tropical resorts. My bank account fluctuated based on client payments. I drove a reliable but aging Honda Civic that Dad had helped me buy, and my idea of a vacation was a weekend camping trip to the mountains. But what hurt most wasn't the money. It was how Veronica used our different circumstances to position herself as the family success story and me as the cautionary tale. At every birthday party, holiday celebration, and family dinner, she would find subtle ways to highlight the contrast between our lives. She'd ask about my little projects in a tone that made my work sound like a hobby rather than a career. She'd offer unsolicited advice about getting back into the real corporate world, suggesting that my freelancing was just a phase one needed to outgrow. Our parents, who loved both of us, seemed genuinely confused by my choices. They respected my independence and creativity, but they couldn't understand why I wouldn't want the security and prestige that Veronica had achieved. They'd listen politely when I talked about my clients and projects, but their eyes would light up whenever Veronica shared news about her latest promotion or business triumph. The family dynamics were complicated by the fact that Veronica wasn't just successful, she was genuinely talented at what she did. Preston and Associates hadn't promoted her to Senior Vice President of Client Relations just because she was charming and ambitious. She had a brilliant strategic mind, an intuitive understanding of consumer psychology, and an ability to identify market opportunities that others missed. Her success wasn't undeserved. It was the result of genuine skill combined with relentless hard work, which made my position in the family even more uncomfortable. I couldn't dismiss her achievements or claim that she'd gotten lucky. She was legitimately excellent at her job, and everyone knew it. The problem was that her success had become the measuring stick by which everyone evaluated my choices, and by that standard, I was perpetually falling short. The extended family had embraced this narrative completely. At Cousin Maria's wedding, Aunt Rosa introduced Veronica to everyone as our family's businesswoman, and me as Natalie, who's still figuring things out. At my grandfather's 80th birthday party, Uncle Miguel spent 20 minutes asking Veronica about her work, and gave me a polite, but brief, "How's the computer stuff going?" before moving on to other topics. I had learned to navigate these interactions with a mixture of grace and internal frustration. I genuinely loved my family and understood that their questions came from a place of concern rather than malice. They wanted me to be successful and secure, and in their minds, success looked like Veronica's life. Stable corporate position, substantial income, clear markers of achievement that everyone could understand and celebrate. But as I sat in family gatherings, listening to another round of praise for Veronica's latest business victory, while fielding well-meaning but patronizing questions about when I planned to get a real job, I sometimes wondered if they saw me as a person with my own valid path, or just as a less successful version of my sister. I had no idea that this family dynamic was about to explode in the most spectacular way possible, and that everything I thought I knew about success, failure, and my place in the family hierarchy was about to be turned completely upside down. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What my family didn't see, what Veronica couldn't understand, and what I had spent 5 years building in the shadows, was a network of relationships and expertise that would soon prove more valuable than any corporate title or six-figure salary. While everyone was measuring my worth by traditional standards, I was quietly becoming something they never expected: indispensable. My freelance career hadn't been the directionless wandering that my family imagined. Every small business client, every late-night project, every little marketing campaign had been teaching me something that the corporate world couldn't: how to understand businesses from the ground up, how to identify real problems and create genuine solutions, and how to build trust with people who were risking everything on their dreams. Take my work with Riverside Coffee Roasters, for example. When owner Jake Patterson hired me 3 years ago, his family's coffee shop was struggling to compete with the Starbucks that had opened 2 blocks away. His previous marketing firm, ironically, A competitor of Veronica's company had charged him $15,000 for a generic rebrand that looked impressive in presentations, but did nothing to address his actual challenges. I spent weeks in his shop, observing customer patterns, talking to regulars, understanding what made his coffee special, and why people chose to walk past the Starbucks to get there. Instead of just designing prettier social media posts, I helped him create a community loyalty program that turned his customers into advocates. I designed a subscription service that kept his most devoted coffee lovers engaged year-round. Most importantly, I helped him tell the story of his family's 3-generation coffee roasting tradition in a way that made every cup feel personal. 18 months later, Jake had opened 2 additional locations and was roasting coffee for 12 other independent cafes across the city. But more than the business growth, I had earned something invaluable: his complete trust and a reputation in Denver's small business community as someone who actually delivered results. This pattern repeated itself with client after client. Marina Volkov, who owned a struggling European bakery in the Arts District, became one of Denver's most popular catering companies after I helped her develop an online ordering system and social media strategy that showcased her incredible pastries. The Torres family, whose automotive parts store was losing customers to online retailers, saw a 300% increase in sales after I helped them create an e-commerce platform and digital marketing strategy that highlighted their expertise and personal service. But perhaps my most significant relationship was with Diana Chen, the brilliant but socially awkward founder of CloudVault Technologies. Diana had developed revolutionary data security software that could protect small businesses from cyber threats at a fraction of the cost of enterprise solutions. Her technology was groundbreaking, but she had no idea how to market it, how to explain its benefits to non-technical customers, or how to build the kind of business partnerships that would allow her company to scale. When Diana hired me 18 months ago, CloudVault was essentially her working alone in a converted warehouse space, with incredible technology that nobody knew about. I didn't just help her with marketing, I became her translator, helping her communicate the value of her innovations in language that business owners could understand and appreciate. Together, we developed case studies showing exactly how her software had protected my other clients from data breaches. We created educational content that positioned Diana as a thought leader in cybersecurity for small businesses. Most importantly, I introduced her to my network of business owners who became her first real customers, providing testimonials and referrals that helped her build credibility in the market. Over the course of our partnership, I had essentially become CloudVault's unofficial chief marketing officer, though Diana couldn't afford to pay me a traditional salary. Instead, we had worked out an arrangement where I received equity in the company in addition to my consulting fees. At the time, the equity seemed like a nice gesture rather than something with real value. Diana's company was still small, still struggling, still unknown outside of our immediate business community. What I didn't know was that Diana's technology had caught the attention of some very important people. While I was helping her build relationships with local businesses, she had also been quietly developing partnerships with larger companies who were interested in her cybersecurity solutions. The combination of her brilliant technology and the market credibility we had built together was attracting investors and potential acquirers who saw massive potential in what she had created. Meanwhile, my relationship with Veronica was becoming increasingly strained. The more successful my clients became, the more she seemed to dismiss my work as luck or coincidence rather than skill. When Jake Patterson's coffee shop started getting featured in Denver lifestyle magazines, Veronica suggested that small business success was easier than corporate marketing because the standards were lower. When Marina's Bakery won a local business award, Veronica implied that local recognition didn't carry the same weight as national corporate achievements. But the most painful aspect of our dynamic was how Veronica had started using my career choices as a cautionary tale in her own professional circles. I learned from mutual family friends that she would tell colleagues about her sister who thought she could make it as a freelancer, as an example of how the gig economy gave people unrealistic expectations about entrepreneurship. She presented my struggles with irregular income and client acquisition as evidence that people needed the structure and security that only traditional corporate careers could provide. What hurt most was that she genuinely seemed to believe she was protecting me by encouraging me to abandon freelancing and return to the corporate world. In her mind, my small business clients and modest income were proof that I was settling for less than I deserved, rather than building something meaningful and valuable. Our parents, influenced by Veronica's perspective and their own understanding of success, had started treating my career like a phase that I needed to outgrow. They loved me and wanted the best for me, but they couldn't see the value in what I was building because it didn't look like traditional success. When I tried to explain the satisfaction I found in helping small businesses grow, or the expertise I was developing in digital strategy, they listened politely but clearly hoped I would eventually realize that Veronica's path was the wiser choice. The family dinner that would change everything was approaching, and I had no idea that it would be the night when all the relationships I had built, all the trust I had earned, and all the expertise I had developed would finally prove their worth in the most dramatic way possible. I thought I was just going to another family gathering, where I would smile politely while everyone celebrated Veronica's latest achievement and tolerated my continued experimenting with freelance work. I had no idea that my sister was about to make the biggest mistake of her professional life, or that her attempt to humiliate me would backfire in a way that would transform our family dynamics forever. The week before our family's monthly dinner gathering, everything in Veronica's world seemed to align perfectly for what she believed would be her greatest professional triumph. She had been courting Meridian Industries for over 8 months, a Fortune 500 technology conglomerate known for acquiring promising startups and integrating them into their massive corporate ecosystem. Landing Meridian as a client would be the crowning achievement of her career at Preston & Associates, potentially leading to a partnership position and cementing her reputation as one of Denver's most successful marketing executives. Meridian's expansion into the Denver market represented a $50 million opportunity for whatever marketing firm could demonstrate the strategic insight and local market knowledge to guide their regional growth. Veronica had been competing against 3 other top-tier firms, including 2 from California that specialized in tech company acquisitions. The fact that she had made it to the final round of consideration was already being celebrated as a major victory within Preston & Associates. Her presentation to Meridian's executive team had taken place just 2 days before our family dinner, and by all accounts, it had been spectacular. Veronica had spent months researching Denver's business landscape, analyzing demographic trends, and developing a comprehensive strategy for positioning Meridian's acquired companies within the local market. Her presentation included detailed market analysis, creative campaign concepts, and a timeline that impressed even Meridian's notoriously demanding Chief Strategy Officer, Rebecca Thornfield. The preliminary feedback from Meridian had been overwhelmingly positive. Rebecca Thornfield herself had complimented Veronica's thoroughness and strategic thinking, noting that her local market insights were exactly what Meridian needed to avoid the cultural missteps that had plagued their expansion efforts in other cities. The other Preston & Associates partners were already treating Veronica like she had won the contract, discussing bonus structures and celebrating what they assumed would be a landmark victory for the firm. For Veronica, this success felt like validation of everything she had worked toward since college. She had always been driven by the need to prove herself in increasingly competitive environments, and Meridian represented the ultimate test of her capabilities. Landing this contract wouldn't just mean financial success. It would establish her as a major player in Denver's business community and open doors to opportunities she had only dreamed about. But beyond the professional implications, Veronica saw the Meridian contract as vindication of her life choices and, by extension, proof that her approach to success was superior to mine. She had always believed that my freelance career was a mistake, that I was wasting my potential by working with small businesses instead of pursuing the kind of high-stakes corporate opportunities that could lead to real wealth and influence. The Meridian victory would demonstrate that her years of corporate climbing, her focus on prestigious clients, and her willingness to work within traditional power structures had been the right choice all along. In the days leading up to our family dinner, Veronica couldn't contain her excitement. She called her parents multiple times to share updates about the presentation and the positive feedback she had received. She had already started planning how she would announce her success at dinner, envisioning the moment when she could share news that would make everyone understand just how far she had come and how much she had achieved. Our monthly family dinners had become increasingly elaborate affairs as Veronica's success had grown. What had once been casual gatherings at our parents' house had evolved into carefully orchestrated events at upscale restaurants, with Veronica often covering the cost as a way of demonstrating her generosity and success. She enjoyed these dinners because they provided a perfect stage for sharing her achievements with an audience that appreciated and celebrated her accomplishments. For this particular dinner, Veronica had chosen Bella Vista, an exclusive restaurant in downtown Denver, known for its impressive wine list and reputation as a power lunch destination for the city's business elite. She had reserved a private dining room that could accommodate our extended family, while providing the sophisticated atmosphere she felt matched her professional status. The restaurant choice itself was a statement about how far she had risen above our middle-class origins. In the week before dinner, Veronica had been dropping hints about having major news to share with the family. She told our parents that this dinner would be extra special and suggested they invite some of our extended family members who would want to hear about her latest achievements. She was building anticipation for what she clearly expected would be a triumphant announcement that would reinforce her position as the family's greatest success story. What made Veronica's confidence even more pronounced was that she had been invited to bring a guest to the dinner. Rebecca Thornfield, Meridian's chief strategy officer, would be in Denver that weekend for additional meetings, and Veronica had suggested they have dinner together to continue their business discussions in a more relaxed setting. Rebecca had accepted the invitation, curious to meet Veronica's family and learn more about her background and local connections. For Veronica, Rebecca's presence at the dinner represented the perfect opportunity to showcase how sophisticated and well-connected she had become. Having a Fortune 500 executive at our family table would demonstrate that she moved in elite business circles, and that her success had earned her access to the kind of power and influence that most people could only imagine. It would also provide an audience for her announcement about the Meridian contract that could appreciate the full significance of her achievement. In Veronica's mind, everything was perfectly orchestrated for an evening that would celebrate her rise to the top of Denver's business hierarchy. She would announce her success to a family that had always supported her ambitions, in the presence of a client who could validate her professional capabilities, at a restaurant that reflected her sophisticated taste and financial success. It would be the culmination of years of strategic career building and proof that her approach to life had been superior to everyone else's, especially mine. She had even prepared remarks for the dinner, planning how she would present the news about Meridian in a way that was celebratory but appropriately modest. She wanted to acknowledge the hard work that had led to this success, while also making it clear that this was just the beginning of even greater achievements to come. In her mind, this dinner would be remembered as the night when the family truly understood the magnitude of what she had accomplished. But what Veronica didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Rebecca Thornfield had her own agenda for attending our family dinner. While Veronica believed that Rebecca was simply interested in continuing their business relationship in a social setting, Rebecca was actually conducting a final evaluation of Veronica's character and judgment. Meridian's acquisition strategy wasn't just about finding companies with good technology. It was about finding partners who embodied the values and integrity that Meridian wanted to associate with their brand. Rebecca had learned through her years in corporate leadership that the most telling insights about potential partners often came from observing how they treated their families, how they spoke about people they considered beneath them, and how they handled situations where they believed they held all the power. She had attended dozens of family dinners and social gatherings with potential partners, using these informal settings to assess whether their public personas matched their private characters. As Veronica prepared for what she expected would be her greatest triumph, she had no idea that she was walking into a test that would determine not just her professional future, but the entire trajectory of our family's story. The stage was set for an evening that would reveal everyone's true character in the most dramatic way possible. The evening of the family dinner started with small details that felt slightly off, though at the time I attributed them to pre-celebration nerves rather than warning signs of the disaster to come. Veronica had arrived at Bella Vista 30 minutes early, which was unusual for someone who typically made strategic late entrances to maximize the impact of her presence. When I walked into the private dining room, I found her pacing near the windows, checking her phone repeatedly and adjusting the place cards she had carefully arranged around the table. "Rebecca should be here any minute," she announced to our parents, who were already seated and looking slightly overwhelmed by the restaurant's formal atmosphere. "I want everything to be perfect when she arrives. This is a very important evening for all of us." The way Veronica emphasized "all of us" struck me as odd. Typically, her professional achievements were presented as personal victories that reflected well on the family but didn't directly impact anyone else's life. Tonight, she seemed to be suggesting that Rebecca Thornfield's presence would somehow benefit everyone at the table, though she hadn't explained exactly how or why. Our extended family began arriving shortly after I did. Aunt Carmen brought her husband Miguel and their twin daughters, who were both in college and always seemed impressed by Veronica's success stories. Uncle Roberto came with his new girlfriend, a dental hygienist named Patricia, who had never attended one of our family dinners before and kept asking quiet questions about who everyone was and how we were all related. But it was the seating arrangement that provided the first real indication that something was different about this dinner. Veronica had positioned herself at the head of the table, with an empty chair to her right reserved for Rebecca, and another empty chair to her left that remained conspicuously unassigned. When I asked where I should sit, Veronica gestured vaguely toward the far end of the table, near Uncle Roberto's girlfriend and the younger cousins. "I thought it would be better to have the business conversation at this end," she explained, indicating the chairs near her. "You'll probably be more comfortable with the family talk anyway." The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable. Veronica was creating a hierarchy for the evening, positioning herself and Rebecca as the important guests, while relegating me to the section of the table reserved for people whose opinions and experiences weren't relevant to the meaningful conversations that would take place. When Rebecca Thornfield arrived, I understood immediately why Veronica had been so nervous about making the right impression. Rebecca commanded attention the moment she walked into the room. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confident bearing that comes from years of making decisions that affect thousands of people's lives. She was probably in her mid-40s, with silver-streaked auburn hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her surroundings. "Mrs. Rivera, Mr. Rivera," Rebecca said, greeting our parents first with the kind of respectful formality that immediately put them at ease. "Veronica has told me so much about her family. Thank you for including me in what I know is a special tradition for all of you." As Rebecca made her way around the table, introducing herself to each family member, I noticed that she spent an equal amount of time with everyone, asking thoughtful questions about Uncle Roberto's construction business and showing genuine interest in the twins' college experiences. When she reached me, her handshake was firm and her smile seemed genuinely warm. "You must be Natalie," she said. "Veronica mentioned that you work in digital marketing. What kind of clients do you typically work with?" The question was simple enough, but I noticed Veronica's slight tension as Rebecca asked it. "Oh, Natalie works with small businesses mostly," Veronica interjected before I could respond fully. "Local restaurants, coffee shops, that sort of thing. It's quite different from the corporate level we work at." Rebecca nodded politely, but maintained eye contact with me. "Small businesses can be incredibly challenging clients," she said. "They often need more creative solutions because they don't have the resources for traditional marketing approaches. What's been your most interesting project lately?" I started to tell her about my work with Diana Chen in Cloud Vault Technologies, but Veronica quickly steered the conversation toward the restaurant's wine selection and the appetizers she had pre-ordered for everyone. It was a smooth transition, but it felt like a deliberate attempt to prevent me from sharing too much detail about my work with Rebecca. Throughout the first course, I observed the dynamic between Veronica and Rebecca with growing unease. While Rebecca was polite and engaged, there was something measuring in her attention that went beyond normal social courtesy. She asked pointed questions about Veronica's background, her approach to client relationships, and her philosophy about business ethics. The questions seemed casual enough, but they had an undertone that felt more like an interview than dinner conversation. Veronica, meanwhile, was performing rather than simply being herself. Her laugh was slightly too loud, her stories were carefully edited to emphasize her successes while minimizing any challenges or failures, and her opinions about various business topics sounded rehearsed rather than authentic. She kept steering the conversation toward Preston and Associates' impressive client roster and her role in their recent victories, as if she needed to continuously prove her credentials to Rebecca. But what troubled me most was how Veronica had started treating our family members as props in her professional presentation, rather than people Rebecca might genuinely want to know. When Uncle Roberto mentioned a particularly challenging construction project he was managing, Veronica quickly changed the subject to avoid what she apparently considered boring family talk. When the twins started discussing their college experiences, Veronica interrupted to share an anecdote about her own Northwestern achievements that would be more relevant to Rebecca. The way she was managing the conversation felt calculating and dismissive, as if she were editing our family in real time to present only the aspects that supported her professional image. It was particularly painful to watch our parents, who were clearly proud to have Rebecca at their table but seemed increasingly uncertain about when it was appropriate for them to speak or share their own experiences. Rebecca, for her part, appeared to be cataloging these interactions with increasing interest. She would nod encouragingly when family members started to share something about themselves, and I noticed her slight frown when Veronica would redirect those conversations back to business topics. At one point, when Aunt Carmen mentioned her volunteer work with a local literacy program, Rebecca asked several follow-up questions that Veronica eventually cut short by announcing that the main course was being served. By the time we reached the middle of dinner, I had developed a growing sense that this evening was not unfolding the way Veronica had planned. While she seemed to believe that she was impressing Rebecca with her sophistication and business acumen, Rebecca's responses were becoming increasingly polite rather than engaged. The measuring quality in Rebecca's attention had sharpened into something that looked more like evaluation than admiration. The most telling moment came when Rebecca excused herself to take a phone call between courses. As soon as she left the table, Veronica's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly, and she began giving rapid-fire instructions to family members about conversation topics they should or shouldn't pursue when Rebecca returned. "Dad, maybe don't mention the auto shop unless she asks directly," Veronica said quietly but urgently. "And Roberto, if she brings up construction, try to focus on the high-end projects, not the residential stuff." The fact that Veronica felt the need to coach our family on how to present themselves revealed how much anxiety she was carrying beneath her confident exterior. She was treating this dinner like a performance where everyone needed to play their assigned roles perfectly, rather than a genuine opportunity for Rebecca to meet the people who mattered to her. As Rebecca returned to the table and we prepared for the main course, I had a growing certainty that this evening was heading towards some kind of confrontation or revelation that none of us were prepared for. The tension between Veronica's expectations and the reality of how the dinner was unfolding felt like a pressure cooker building toward an inevitable explosion. The moment that shattered everything came during dessert, when Veronica finally felt confident enough to make the announcement she had been building toward all evening. She had managed to guide the conversation through dinner, while maintaining what she believed was the perfect balance of family warmth and professional sophistication. Rebecca had complimented the restaurant choice, engaged politely with our family members, and shown appropriate interest in Veronica's career achievements. In Veronica's mind, the stage was perfectly set for her triumphant revelation. "I have some wonderful news to share with everyone," Veronica began, her voice carrying the practiced confidence of someone who had rehearsed this moment multiple times. "Rebecca and I have been working together on what I believe will be the most significant contract of my career. Meridian Industries has chosen Preston and Associates to guide their expansion into the Denver market, and I'll be leading the entire campaign." She paused for the family's reaction, and our parents immediately began offering congratulations and expressions of pride. Uncle Roberto raised his wine glass for a toast, and the twins started asking excited questions about what this meant for Veronica's career. It was exactly the kind of celebratory moment that Veronica had envisioned, with our family's enthusiasm providing the perfect backdrop for her professional victory. But as I watched Rebecca's face during this announcement, I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. Instead of the pleased confirmation that Veronica clearly expected, Rebecca's expression had shifted to something between surprise and discomfort. She wasn't nodding in agreement or smiling with satisfaction. She was staring at Veronica with the kind of focused attention that comes before delivering difficult news. "Veronica," Rebecca said carefully, her voice cutting through the family's celebrations, "I think there may be some miscommunication about Meridian's decision. We haven't actually finalized our choice of marketing partners yet." The words hit the table like a physical blow. Veronica's confident smile faltered, and she looked genuinely confused rather than merely disappointed. "But the feedback from your team was so positive," she said, her voice carrying a note of desperation that she was trying to mask as professional curiosity. "Your assistant mentioned that you were very impressed with our presentation." Rebecca's discomfort was becoming more visible by the second. "The presentation was certainly thorough and professional," she said diplomatically. "But as I mentioned during our initial meetings, Meridian's selection process involves multiple factors beyond just marketing strategy. We're looking for partners who align with our company values and demonstrate the kind of integrity that we want associated with our brand." The conversation had taken a turn that was clearly making everyone at the table uncomfortable. Our parents were exchanging worried glances, uncertain whether they should continue celebrating or prepare for disappointing news. Uncle Roberto had quietly lowered his wine glass, and the twins were looking back and forth between Veronica and Rebecca like they were watching a tennis match. But Veronica, instead of recognizing the warning signs in Rebecca's tone, seemed to interpret this as an opportunity to further demonstrate her qualifications. "I completely understand Meridian's commitment to integrity," she said, leaning forward with renewed intensity. "That's exactly why Preston and Associates is the right choice for this partnership. We've built our reputation on ethical business practices and delivering results for our clients." Rebecca nodded politely, but I could see that she was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I'm sure that's true," she said. "But part of our evaluation process involves understanding how potential partners treat people in their personal lives, not just their professional relationships. We've found that someone's character in family settings often reflects how they'll behave in business situations." The statement hung in the air with ominous weight. Veronica seemed to sense that something was wrong, but she couldn't quite identify what had shifted in the conversation. "I think our family dinner tonight demonstrates exactly the kind of values that Meridian appreciates," she said, gesturing around the table. "Strong family relationships, respect for tradition, and the importance of celebrating success together." It was at that moment that Rebecca's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Actually, Veronica, I've been quite troubled by some of the dynamics I've observed this evening. The way you've managed the conversation, the way you've treated your family members, and particularly the way you've spoken about your sister's career choices, suggest a pattern of behavior that concerns me." The blood drained from Veronica's face as she realized that instead of impressing Rebecca with her family connections, she had apparently been failing some kind of test that she didn't even know she was taking. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean," she said, though her voice suggested that she was beginning to understand exactly what Rebecca meant. Rebecca glanced around the table, clearly uncomfortable with having this conversation in front of our entire family, but apparently feeling that the situation had progressed too far to stop now. Throughout this dinner, you've consistently minimized your sister's work, interrupted family members when they tried to share their experiences, and treated this gathering like a performance designed to advance your professional interests rather than a genuine family celebration. I felt the entire table's attention shift toward me as Rebecca continued. When I asked Natalie about her work, you immediately dismissed it as quite different from the corporate level. When your uncle tried to discuss his construction projects, you redirected the conversation to avoid what you considered irrelevant family talk. You've essentially used your family as props in a presentation, rather than treating them as people whose experiences and achievements have value in their own right. Veronica was staring at Rebecca in obvious shock, clearly struggling to process how what she had intended as a perfect evening had transformed into a devastating critique of her character. I was simply trying to keep the conversation focused on topics that would be interesting to you, she said weakly. But that's exactly the problem, Rebecca replied. You assumed that your family's authentic experiences wouldn't be interesting to me, that their stories weren't worth sharing, that only your professional achievements were worthy of discussion. That kind of thinking suggests a fundamental lack of respect for people you consider beneath your professional status. The silence that followed was excruciating. Our parents looked stricken, uncertain whether they should defend Veronica or acknowledge the accuracy of Rebecca's observations. Uncle Roberto was staring at his plate, and the twins were clearly wishing they could disappear entirely. But what hurt most was watching Veronica's face as she realized that her greatest professional opportunity was slipping away because of character flaws she had never recognized in herself. Rebecca turned to address me directly, and I could see something in her expression that looked almost like sympathy. Natalie, when you mentioned CloudVault Technologies earlier, were you referring to Diana Chen's cybersecurity company? The question came out of nowhere, and I nodded in confusion. Yes, I've been working with Diana for about 18 months, helping her develop marketing strategies and build business relationships. Rebecca's expression shifted to something that looked like recognition and perhaps even approval. Diana Chen is exactly the kind of innovative entrepreneur that Meridian Industries specializes in acquiring. Her cybersecurity technology represents the future of data protection for small and medium-sized businesses. We've been tracking CloudVault's progress for several months now, waiting for the right moment to approach them about a potential acquisition. I felt the world tilt slightly as I processed what Rebecca was saying. Diana's company, the small business that Veronica had dismissed as irrelevant to corporate-level marketing, was apparently significant enough to attract the attention of a Fortune 500 conglomerate. In fact, Rebecca continued, looking directly at me while Veronica sat in stunned silence, Meridian's research suggests that CloudVault's success in the local market has been largely due to exceptional marketing strategy and business development support. We've been trying to identify who's been providing that guidance, because we believe they would be invaluable in helping us integrate CloudVault into our corporate structure. The revelation hit the table like an earthquake. Everything that Veronica had dismissed about my work, everything she had minimized as small-time and irrelevant, was suddenly being revealed as exactly the kind of expertise that Meridian Industries valued most. The little projects she had mocked were apparently significant enough to attract the attention of the very company she had been desperately trying to impress. As I sat there trying to process this information, I realized that the family dinner Veronica had orchestrated to celebrate her professional triumph had instead become the moment when everything she thought she knew about success, value, and worth was completely turned upside down. The aftermath of Rebecca's revelation created a surreal atmosphere at our family table that I can only describe as emotional whiplash. While I was still processing the shocking news that my work with Diana Chen had apparently caught the attention of a Fortune 500 company, Veronica was desperately trying to salvage what remained of her professional opportunity. The confident, controlled woman who had orchestrated this entire evening was rapidly unraveling before our eyes. "Rebecca, I think there might be some confusion here," Veronica said, her voice taking on a strained quality that I had never heard before. When you say Meridian has been tracking Cloud Vault, surely you don't mean that a small local company would be a serious acquisition target for a corporation of your size and scope. The desperation in her tone was palpable. She was trying to minimize the significance of my connection to Diana's company, while simultaneously attempting to position herself as someone who could provide valuable insights about the local business landscape. But every word she spoke seemed to dig her deeper into the hole she had created for herself. Rebecca's response was measured but devastating. Actually, Veronica, that assumption perfectly illustrates why Preston and Associates isn't the right fit for Meridian's expansion strategy. You're operating under the misconception that bigger automatically means better, that established corporations are inherently more valuable than innovative startups. Cloud Vault represents exactly the kind of disruptive technology and agile business model that drives Meridian's acquisition strategy. I watched my sister's face cycle through a range of emotions: confusion, panic, anger, and finally a kind of desperate calculation as she tried to figure out how to turn this disaster to her advantage. Of course, I completely understand the value of innovative startups, she said quickly. In fact, if Meridian is interested in Cloud Vault, Preston and Associates could provide invaluable support in integrating their marketing approach with Meridian's corporate standards. But Rebecca was already shaking her head. The entire point of acquiring companies like Cloud Vault is to preserve and scale their existing success factors, not to impose traditional corporate marketing approaches that might stifle their innovation. Based on what I've observed tonight, I don't believe you understand or value the kind of authentic, relationship-based marketing that has made Cloud Vault successful. The conversation was spiraling beyond Veronica's ability to control, but she couldn't seem to stop herself from making it worse. Natalie's work with small businesses has certainly been adequate, she said, glancing desperately between Rebecca and me. But surely you can see that she lacks the corporate experience and strategic perspective that a company like Meridian would require for a major acquisition integration. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable, and I could see Rebecca's expression harden in response. Our parents were sitting in stunned silence, clearly uncertain whether they should try to intervene or simply wait for this nightmare to end. Uncle Roberto had stopped eating entirely and was staring at his hands, while the twins were exchanging wide-eyed glances that suggested they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Actually, Rebecca said coldly, from what I've learned about Cloud Vault's market success, Natalie appears to possess exactly the kind of strategic insight and relationship-building skills that Meridian values most. The fact that you can't recognize those qualities in your own sister suggests a significant blind spot in your business judgment. That statement hit Veronica like a physical blow. She sat back in her chair, her face flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and rising anger. For several long moments, she seemed to be struggling with whether to apologize, argue, or simply leave the table entirely. When she finally spoke, her voice carried an edge that made everyone uncomfortable. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here, she said, her professional composure beginning to crack. Natalie has been struggling financially for years, jumping from project to project without any real stability or significant income. She drives a 10-year-old car, lives in a rental apartment, and has never managed a marketing budget larger than a few $1,000s. I'm not trying to be cruel, but surely you can see that her experience level isn't comparable to what Meridian would require. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Veronica had just publicly humiliated me in front of our entire family and a Fortune 500 executive, using my financial struggles as evidence that my work lacked value or significance. But what made it even more painful was that some of what she said was true. I did drive an old car, I did live in a rental apartment, and my individual project budgets were relatively small compared to corporate marketing campaigns. Rebecca's reaction was immediate and sharp. Veronica, what you've just done is exactly why Meridian can't work with Preston and Associates. You've demonstrated a complete lack of understanding about what creates real business value, and you've shown a willingness to publicly humiliate a family member to protect your own professional interests. Our mother finally spoke up, her voice trembling with a mixture of embarrassment and protective anger. Veronica, That was completely inappropriate. Apologize to your sister immediately. But Veronica was past the point of rational response. The evening that was supposed to showcase her greatest professional triumph had become a public demonstration of her character flaws, and she was lashing out like a cornered animal. "I'm just being honest about the reality of our situations," she said, her voice rising. "Everyone at this table knows that I've built a successful career while Natalie has been playing around with hobby projects that barely pay her bills." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Rebecca looked shocked by the viciousness of Veronica's attack. Our father's face had gone completely red, and I could see him struggling with whether to defend me or try to salvage what little dignity remained for our family. But it was Rebecca who spoke next, and her words carried the weight of final judgment. "I've seen enough," she said, placing her napkin on the table with deliberate precision. "Veronica, Meridian Industries will not be working with Preston and Associates. Your behavior tonight has demonstrated that you lack the emotional intelligence, professional judgment, and basic human decency that we require in our business partners." She turned to address our parents directly. "Mr. and Mrs. Rivera, I apologize that this business discussion has disrupted your family dinner. You've raised one daughter who understands the value of authentic relationships and genuine service to others, and another who apparently sees people as obstacles to her own advancement." Then Rebecca looked directly at me, and I could see something in her expression that looked almost like respect. "Natalie, I'd very much like to continue our conversation about Cloud Vault and your work with Diana Chen. Would you be available to meet with me tomorrow morning? I believe Meridian might have some interesting opportunities to discuss." I nodded numbly, still trying to process everything that had happened. In the span of 30 minutes, my sister had gone from announcing her greatest professional triumph to losing the biggest opportunity of her career, while I had somehow gone from being the family failure to having a meeting with a Fortune 500 executive who was interested in my work. As Rebecca gathered her things and prepared to leave, Veronica made one final, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Rebecca, please don't let tonight's family dynamics influence your business decisions. I can provide references from dozens of satisfied clients who can attest to my professional capabilities." Rebecca paused at the door and looked back at Veronica with something that might have been pity. "The problem isn't your professional capabilities, Veronica. The problem is your character, and that's not something that can be fixed with references." After Rebecca left, our family sat in stunned silence around the table, surrounded by the wreckage of what was supposed to have been a celebration. Veronica was staring at her hands, her face pale and her breathing shallow. Our parents looked like they had aged 10 years in the past hour. The twins were clearly desperate to escape, and Uncle Roberto was studying the wine bottle like it contained the answers to life's deepest mysteries. I realized that everything I thought I knew about my place in our family, about success and failure, about the value of my work and my choices, had been completely transformed in the course of a single disastrous dinner. But I also realized that the real test was just beginning. I had to figure out what to do with this unexpected opportunity, and how to navigate the family relationships that had been shattered by Veronica's spectacular self-destruction. The 24 hours between that disastrous family dinner and my scheduled meeting with Rebecca Thornfield felt like living in an alternate reality. I barely slept, spending most of the night researching everything I could find about Meridian Industries' acquisition strategy, their corporate structure, and their recent expansions into new markets. If I was going to walk into a meeting with a Fortune 500 executive, I needed to understand exactly what I might be walking into. What I discovered during my research was both thrilling and terrifying. Meridian wasn't just any large corporation. They were specifically known for identifying innovative technology companies with strong local market presence and helping them scale to national or international levels. Their acquisition model involved preserving the entrepreneurial culture and operational independence of acquired companies, while providing the financial resources and strategic support needed for rapid growth. More importantly, I learned that Rebecca Thornfield wasn't just any executive. As Chief Strategy Officer, she was personally responsible for identifying acquisition targets, and ensuring that potential partners aligned with Meridian's values and long-term vision. The fact that she wanted to meet with me wasn't just a courtesy. It suggested that Meridian was seriously considering some kind of business relationship that could involve both Diana's company and my role in its success. But as I prepared for the meeting, I also had to confront the reality of my family situation. Veronica had called me 3 times after dinner, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails that alternated between apology and blame. In the first message, she acknowledged that she had gotten emotional during dinner, but insisted that Rebecca had misunderstood her intentions. By the third message, she was suggesting that I had somehow sabotaged her relationship with Meridian by not being more supportive of her presentation. Our parents had also called, clearly struggling with how to process what they had witnessed. Mom's voice was strained when she said, "Natalie, honey, we had no idea that your work was so significant. Veronica has always been so successful that we assumed that corporate success was the only kind that really mattered." Dad's follow-up call was even more direct. "Your sister made some terrible choices last night, but we need to figure out how to handle this as a family." The most revealing conversation came from an unexpected source. Diana Chen called me early the next morning, her voice containing an excitement I had never heard before. "Natalie, something incredible is happening," she said. "I got a call last night from someone at Meridian Industries saying they want to schedule a meeting about potential partnership opportunities. They specifically mentioned that they'd been impressed by CloudVault's market strategy and business development approach." As Diana continued talking, I began to understand the full scope of what was unfolding. Meridian hadn't just been casually observing CloudVault's progress. They had been conducting detailed analysis of the company's growth trajectory, customer acquisition strategies, and market positioning. According to Diana, they had specifically noted the effectiveness of CloudVault's marketing campaigns and the strength of the business relationships that had driven their expansion. "They said something interesting," Diana continued. "The Meridian representative mentioned that they were particularly impressed by the authenticity and relationship-based approach that had made CloudVault successful in the local market. They said it was exactly the kind of sustainable growth strategy they wanted to preserve and scale." I felt a chill of recognition as Diana repeated those words. Rebecca had used almost identical language when describing what Meridian valued in potential partners. It was becoming clear that my work with Diana hadn't just been successful. It had been successful in exactly the ways that attracted Meridian's attention. But Diana's next revelation was the most shocking of all. "Natalie, they asked specifically about you. They wanted to know about your role in CloudVault's success and whether you would be interested in continuing to work with us if we entered into a partnership with Meridian. It sounds like they're not just interested in acquiring CloudVault. They're interested in acquiring the entire team that made CloudVault successful." I spent the rest of the morning calling other clients to understand whether Meridian's interest extended beyond CloudVault. What I discovered was a pattern that I had never fully recognized before. Jake Patterson's coffee shops had expanded to 5 locations and were being approached by regional investors interested in franchising opportunities. Marina Volkov's catering business had grown to the point where she was considering opening a 2nd location and had been contacted by food industry distributors who wanted to carry her products statewide. The Torres family's automotive parts business had become so successful online that they were being courted by national parts retailers who wanted to acquire their customer database and e-commerce platform. Each of my clients had achieved growth that went far beyond their original goals, and several were attracting attention from larger companies interested in partnership or acquisition opportunities. As I compiled this information, I began to see my freelance career from an entirely different perspective. What I had thought of as a series of individual client relationships was actually a portfolio of success stories that demonstrated a consistent ability to identify market opportunities, develop effective strategies, and execute campaigns that drove sustainable growth. The skills that Veronica had dismissed as adequate for small business work were apparently exactly the skills that major corporations valued most. But the most significant discovery came when I researched Meridian's previous acquisitions and the marketing professionals they had retained or hired during those transitions. The pattern was unmistakable. Meridian consistently sought out marketers who understood how to preserve and scale the authentic, relationship-based approaches that had made their acquisition targets successful in the first place. They weren't interested in imposing traditional corporate marketing strategies on innovative companies. Instead, they wanted to find ways to amplify and expand the authentic approaches that had driven organic growth. This was exactly the opposite of what Veronica had assumed about corporate marketing, and it explained why her traditional, hierarchical approach to client relationships had been so off-putting to Rebecca. As I prepared for my meeting with Rebecca, I also had to confront the reality that this opportunity represented everything Veronica had been working toward for years: access to major corporate opportunities, the chance to work with Fortune 500 companies, and the potential for significant financial advancement. The irony wasn't lost on me that the hobby projects she had mocked were opening doors to exactly the kind of success she had been desperately pursuing. But what troubled me most was the realization that this opportunity was coming at the cost of my sister's career and our family relationships. Veronica's behavior at dinner had been inexcusable, but she was still my sister, and I knew that losing the Meridian contract would have devastating consequences for her position at Preston & Associates. The partners had been counting on that contract to establish their firm as a major player in corporate marketing, and Veronica's failure to secure it would likely end her chances of making partner. Our parents were clearly struggling with how to process the sudden reversal in their daughter's fortunes. For 18 years, they had celebrated Veronica's achievements while viewing my choices with loving but concerned tolerance. Now they were being forced to confront the possibility that their understanding of success had been fundamentally flawed, and that the daughter they had seen as less successful was actually the one who had built something truly valuable. As I walked into the Meridian Industries building for my meeting with Rebecca, I carried with me not just the excitement of a potentially life-changing opportunity, but also the weight of knowing that my success might come at the cost of my sister's career and the family dynamics that had defined our relationships for decades. Everything I thought I knew about success, family loyalty, and professional achievement was about to be tested in ways I had never imagined. The Meridian Industries headquarters occupied an entire floor of one of Denver's most prestigious downtown office buildings, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains. As I sat in the elegantly appointed waiting area, watching executives in expensive suits move purposefully through the corridors, I felt like I was entering a world that had always seemed impossibly distant from my freelance reality. Rebecca Thornfield's corner office was a study in understated power, modern furniture, carefully curated artwork, and a wall of awards and recognitions that testified to her influence in the corporate world. But what struck me most was how comfortable she seemed in this environment, radiating the kind of confident authority that comes from years of making decisions that affect thousands of people's lives and millions of dollars in revenue. "Natalie, thank you for meeting with me," Rebecca said, gesturing for me to take a seat across from her desk. "I want to start by apologizing for the awkwardness of last night's dinner. That wasn't the setting I would have chosen for a business discussion, but sometimes circumstances reveal more about people's character than formal interviews ever could." I nodded, still uncertain about exactly what this meeting would entail or what Rebecca's intentions might be. "I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure why I'm here," I said honestly. "Yesterday I was just someone's freelance marketing consultant, and today I'm sitting in a Fortune 500 executive's office discussing business opportunities I don't fully understand." Rebecca smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she seemed genuinely relaxed rather than carefully evaluating everything around her. "Actually, that's exactly why you're here. You see, Natalie, Meridian has been tracking Cloud Vault Technologies for 8 months. But not just because of Diana Chen's innovative technology. We've been equally impressed by the marketing strategy and business development approach that has driven their success." She opened a thick folder on her desk and pulled out what appeared to be a comprehensive report. Our research team has conducted detailed analysis of CloudVault's growth trajectory, customer acquisition patterns, and market positioning strategies. What we've found is a textbook example of authentic, relationship-based marketing that drives sustainable business growth. As Rebecca spread several charts and graphs across her desk, I began to see my work with Diana from an entirely different perspective. What I had thought of as intuitive, creative problem-solving was being presented as sophisticated strategic thinking that had achieved measurable results. The local business relationships I had helped Diana build were being analyzed as a scalable model for national market penetration. The most impressive aspect of CloudVault's success, Rebecca continued, is how they've managed to compete against much larger cybersecurity companies by focusing on genuine customer service and community relationships rather than aggressive sales tactics or price competition. That approach has resulted in customer retention rates that are nearly double the industry average. I studied the data she was showing me, recognizing the campaigns and strategies we had developed, but seeing them through the lens of corporate analysis for the first time. I never thought about measuring our success in those terms, I admitted. Diana and I were just trying to help her customers understand why her technology was valuable and how it could solve their real problems. Exactly, Rebecca said, leaning forward with obvious enthusiasm. That's precisely what makes your approach so valuable. You weren't trying to manipulate customers into buying something they didn't need. You were helping them understand how Diana's technology could genuinely improve their businesses. That authentic approach creates the kind of customer loyalty that can't be bought with traditional advertising. She pulled out another document that made my heart skip a beat. Meridian Industries would like to acquire CloudVault Technologies for $15 million, with the intention of scaling their technology and marketing approach to serve mid-market customers nationwide. But here's what makes this acquisition unusual. We want to retain the entire team that made CloudVault successful, including you. The number hit me like a physical blow. Diana's company, which had started as one woman working alone in a converted warehouse, was worth $15 million to a Fortune 500 corporation. And they wanted to retain me as part of the acquisition package. The position we're offering you, Rebecca continued, would be Vice President of Strategic Marketing for Meridian's Small Business Solutions Division. You would be responsible for applying the relationship-based marketing strategies that made CloudVault successful to all of our small and mid-market technology acquisitions. The starting salary would be $180,000 annually, plus equity participation in our acquisition portfolio. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process numbers that represented more money than I had imagined earning in my entire freelance career. But beyond the financial implications, Rebecca was offering me the chance to do work that I was passionate about, on a scale that could impact thousands of businesses across the country. There's something else you should know, Rebecca said, her tone becoming more serious. Part of our due diligence process for this acquisition involved researching your background and qualifications. We discovered that you've been consistently achieving exceptional results for all of your clients, not just CloudVault. Your success isn't a coincidence. It's a proven methodology that we believe can be scaled and replicated. She handed me another folder that contained detailed analysis of my other client relationships. Jake Patterson's coffee shop expansion, Marina Volkov's catering growth, the Torres family's e-commerce success. All of it had been researched and documented as evidence of my strategic capabilities. What we're really acquiring, Rebecca explained, isn't just Diana's technology or your individual skills. We're acquiring a proven approach to authentic business growth that represents the future of B2B marketing. Traditional corporate marketing focuses on scale and efficiency, but authentic marketing focuses on relationships and genuine value creation. As I reviewed the documents, I realized that Rebecca was offering me everything that Veronica had been working toward for years: a senior executive position at a major corporation, significant financial compensation, and the opportunity to influence marketing strategy on a national scale. But unlike Veronica's pursuit of corporate success through hierarchy and traditional business relationships, this opportunity was being offered specifically because of my commitment to authentic, relationship-based approaches. "I need you to understand something important," Rebecca said, her voice taking on a more personal tone. "Last night's dinner confirmed something that our research had already suggested, that you have the emotional intelligence and genuine commitment to helping others that we require in our senior leadership team. Your sister's behavior, by contrast, demonstrated exactly the kind of ego-driven hierarchical thinking that we actively avoid in our corporate culture." The reference to Veronica created a knot in my stomach. While I was being offered the opportunity of a lifetime, my sister was facing the devastating consequences of her behavior and the loss of the biggest contract of her career. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "I need to ask about something that's been troubling me. Is this opportunity being offered to me because of my qualifications, or because of what happened with Veronica last night?" Rebecca's expression became very serious. "That's an excellent question, and I'm glad you asked it. The answer is that we identified you as a potential partner months ago, completely independent of any relationship with Preston and Associates. Last night's dinner was supposed to be a final evaluation of Veronica's character and judgment, not a comparison between you and your sister." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "However, I won't lie to you. Veronica's behavior last night confirmed that she lacks the emotional intelligence and collaborative mindset that Meridian requires in our partners. The way she treated you and your family demonstrated exactly why traditional corporate marketing approaches often fail to create authentic customer relationships." As I sat in that corner office, looking out at the mountains and processing an offer that would transform my life, I realized that this conversation represented more than just a career opportunity. It was validation of every choice I had made, every risk I had taken, and every client relationship I had prioritized over traditional markers of success. Everything I had built while my family viewed me as the less successful sister was finally being recognized for its true value. The ripple effects of my meeting with Rebecca began within hours of my accepting Meridian's offer. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly news of the CloudVault acquisition would spread through Denver's business community, or how my sudden elevation from freelance consultant to Fortune 500 executive would impact not just my family relationships, but the entire professional ecosystem that had defined my sister's world. Diana Chen called me that afternoon, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. "Natalie, I can't believe this is happening," she said. $15 million for CloudVault, and they want both of us to stay on as executives. 6 months ago, I was working alone in a warehouse space, and now I'm going to be the CTO of a national cybersecurity division. But Diana's excitement was tempered by her characteristic thoughtfulness about the broader implications of our success. "You know what this means, don't you?" she continued. "Every small business owner in Denver is going to want to work with you now. Every marketing consultant is going to try to replicate what we built together. And every major corporation is going to be looking for their own version of authentic marketing strategies." She was right, and the calls started coming almost immediately. Jake Patterson from Riverside Coffee Roasters was fielding inquiries from 3 different regional restaurant chains interested in franchise partnerships. Marina Volkov had been contacted by a food distribution company that wanted to take her catering business national. The Torres family's automotive parts store was being courted by 2 different e-commerce platforms that wanted to acquire their customer database and online marketing systems. But the most significant calls were coming from other businesses that wanted to hire me for marketing consulting, despite the fact that I would soon be starting my executive position at Meridian. Word had spread through Denver's entrepreneurial network that the freelance consultant who got acquired by a Fortune 500 company was the person to work with if you wanted authentic business growth. The local business journal ran a front-page story the next day. local marketing consultant's client acquired by Fortune 500 company for $15 million. The article detailed CloudVault's success story and highlighted my role in developing the marketing strategies that had attracted Meridian's attention. It included quotes from several of my other clients discussing how my approach had transformed their businesses and positioned them for significant growth. More importantly, the article caught the attention of Denver's corporate community. I started receiving calls from established companies that wanted to understand how they could incorporate authentic marketing approaches into their existing business models. CEOs who had never heard of me a week earlier were asking for meetings to discuss potential consulting relationships or strategic partnerships. But it was the reaction within Preston and Associates that revealed the true magnitude of what was happening. According to mutual contacts in the business community, Veronica's failure to secure the Meridian contract had triggered a crisis within the firm. The partners had been counting on that $50 million marketing contract to establish their credibility with Fortune 500 clients and fund their planned expansion into the California market. Without the Meridian contract, Preston and Associates was facing not just the loss of anticipated revenue, but also serious questions about their strategic direction and competitive positioning. If they couldn't land a major corporate client after months of preparation and relationship building, other potential clients would inevitably question whether the firm had the capabilities and insights necessary to compete at the highest levels of corporate marketing. The situation became even more complicated when several of Preston and Associates' existing clients started asking questions about why the firm had been passed over for such a significant opportunity. In the competitive world of corporate marketing, perception often matters as much as reality, and the perception that Preston and Associates had failed to understand what a Fortune 500 company was looking for raised doubts about their strategic capabilities. Veronica's position within the firm became increasingly precarious as the partners tried to understand what had gone wrong with the Meridian presentation. According to industry gossip, the partners were receiving conflicting reports about whether the failure was due to strategic miscalculations, presentation problems, or personality conflicts with the Meridian executives. The truth, which was slowly emerging through various business network conversations, was even more damaging to Veronica's reputation. Word was spreading that a Fortune 500 executive had been personally offended by a Preston and Associates representative's behavior during a family dinner, and that the rejection of their proposal had been based on character concerns rather than professional capabilities. But the most devastating blow to Veronica's career came when Rebecca Thornfield was quoted in the Business Journal article about the CloudVault acquisition. When asked about Meridian's decision-making process for selecting marketing partners, Rebecca had said, "We prioritize authenticity, emotional intelligence, and genuine commitment to client success over traditional corporate credentials. Our experience has shown that the most effective marketing strategies come from professionals who understand that business success is ultimately about building relationships and creating real value for customers." While Rebecca hadn't mentioned Veronica by name, everyone in Denver's business community understood that this statement was a direct critique of the traditional corporate marketing approaches that firms like Preston and Associates represented. The message was clear: Meridian had rejected established corporate marketing firms in favor of a more authentic, relationship-based approach. The impact on Veronica's professional standing was immediate and severe. Clients who had previously viewed her as a sophisticated corporate marketing strategist began questioning whether her approach was outdated or ineffective. Potential clients who had been considering Preston and Associates started looking at smaller, more innovative marketing firms that claimed to offer authentic, relationship-based strategies. Meanwhile, my own professional transformation was happening at an almost overwhelming pace. Meridian's legal team was expediting the CloudVault acquisition process, with a target closing date just 6 weeks away. I was being asked to participate in due diligence meetings, strategic planning sessions, and integration discussions that required me to think about business growth on a scale I had never imagined. The financial implications were equally transformative. My equity stake in the CloudVault acquisition, combined with my new executive salary at Meridian, would provide financial security that I had never experienced in my freelance career. I was looking at apartments in neighborhoods that had previously been beyond my budget, considering car purchases that would have been impossible just weeks earlier, and contemplating financial decisions that reflected a completely different economic reality. But perhaps the most striking change was in how I was being perceived within Denver's business community. The local Chamber of Commerce invited me to speak at their monthly breakfast meeting about authentic marketing strategies. The university's business school asked me to guest lecture in their entrepreneurship program. Industry publications wanted to interview me about the future of small business marketing. I was being positioned as a thought leader and strategic expert, roles that required me to articulate and defend the marketing philosophy that I had developed intuitively through years of working with small business clients. The approaches that had felt natural and collaborative when I was helping individual clients were now being analyzed and discussed as innovative business strategies that could be scaled and replicated. As I prepared for my final weeks of freelance work before transitioning to my executive role at Meridian, I realized that my professional transformation was creating ripple effects throughout Denver's business ecosystem. The success story that had started with helping Diana Chen market her cybersecurity technology was inspiring other entrepreneurs to think differently about authentic business growth, while simultaneously challenging established marketing firms to reconsider their traditional approaches to client relationships and value creation. The complete reversal of fortune between Veronica and me became undeniably clear 6 weeks later at the official announcement event for Meridian's acquisition of CloudVault Technologies. The venue was the Grand Ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel, the same location where Preston and Associates had held their annual Client Appreciation Gala just 18 months earlier, when Veronica had been celebrating her promotion to Senior Vice President. Diana and I stood on the stage alongside Rebecca Thornfield and Meridian's CEO Marcus Blackwood, as they announced not just the acquisition but the creation of Meridian's new Small Business Solutions division. The press release that had gone out that morning identified me as the division's inaugural Vice President of Strategic Marketing, responsible for scaling authentic marketing approaches across Meridian's entire portfolio of small and mid-market technology acquisitions. The audience included representatives from major corporations, technology entrepreneurs, marketing professionals, and business journalists from across the Rocky Mountain region. Many of the faces in the crowd were people who had known me only as Veronica's less successful sister, the freelance consultant who had struggled to establish herself in the competitive corporate world. But the most significant moment came when Marcus Blackwood took the microphone to explain Meridian's strategic vision for the Small Business Solutions division. In today's market, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built a Fortune 500 company from the ground up, authentic customer relationships are more valuable than traditional marketing metrics. Companies that focus on genuine value creation and community building achieve superior long-term growth compared to those that rely on aggressive sales tactics or price competition. He gestured toward Diana and me as he continued, CloudVault Technologies represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking that drives sustainable business success. But equally important is the marketing strategy that helped CloudVault achieve extraordinary customer retention rates and organic growth. We're acquiring not just the technology but the entire approach to authentic business development that made CloudVault successful. As Marcus spoke, I spotted several familiar faces in the audience. Jake Patterson was there, representing the small business community that had been the foundation of my freelance career. Marina Volkov had closed her catering business for the afternoon to attend the announcement. The Torres family had driven down from their automotive parts store to witness the event that had grown out of the business relationships we had built together. But I also recognized faces from Denver's corporate marketing community, including several Preston and Associates employees who had come to observe what their firm had lost when they failed to secure the Meridian contract. The expressions on their faces ranged from professional curiosity to barely concealed shock, as they watched the amateur freelance consultant being celebrated as a strategic innovator by one of the country's most successful corporations. The formal presentation included detailed case studies of CloudVault's growth trajectory, with specific analysis of the marketing strategies that had driven their success. Rebecca Thornfield presented data showing how authentic, relationship-based marketing had achieved customer acquisition costs that were 60% lower than industry averages, while generating customer lifetime values that were nearly triple the typical cybersecurity company benchmarks. What makes these results particularly significant, Rebecca explained to the audience, is that they were achieved without traditional corporate marketing infrastructure. No massive advertising budgets, no aggressive sales teams, no complex automation systems. Instead, CloudVault succeeded by focusing on genuine customer service, community relationships, and educational content that helped customers understand the real value of cybersecurity protection. The presentation culminated with the announcement that Meridian was committing $50 million over the next 3 years to scale this authentic marketing approach across their entire small business portfolio. I would be leading a team of marketing professionals, specifically recruited for their ability to build genuine customer relationships rather than execute traditional corporate campaigns. As the formal presentation concluded and we moved into the networking reception, I found myself surrounded by business leaders who wanted to understand how they could incorporate authentic marketing strategies into their own companies. CEOs who had previously dismissed relationship-based approaches as too soft for serious business were asking detailed questions about customer retention metrics and organic growth strategies. But the most meaningful conversations were with the entrepreneurs and small business owners who saw my success as validation of their own approaches to business development. A restaurant owner from Boulder told me, "You've proven that caring about customers and building real relationships isn't just the right thing to do. It's actually the most effective business strategy." A technology startup founder from Colorado Springs said, "Your story gives me hope that I don't have to choose between being authentic and being successful." The local business media coverage was extensive and uniformly positive. The Denver Business Journal ran a feature story titled, "From Freelancer to Fortune 500: How Authentic Marketing Conquered Corporate America." Colorado Business Magazine included me in their 40 under 40 inches list of rising business leaders. The university's business school announced that they were developing a new course on authentic marketing strategies, with me scheduled as a guest lecturer for the inaugural semester. But perhaps the most satisfying recognition came from an unexpected source. The Small Business Administration asked me to serve on their advisory council for entrepreneurship development, specifically to help them understand how government programs could better support authentic business growth strategies. Federal recognition of my expertise represented a level of professional validation that I had never imagined achieving. Meanwhile, the consequences for Preston and Associates and Veronica's career had become increasingly severe. The loss of the Meridian contract had triggered a cascade of other client departures, as companies began questioning the firm's strategic capabilities and market understanding. 3 major clients had terminated their contracts within a month of the failed Meridian presentation, citing concerns about the firm's ability to adapt to changing market conditions. The firm's partners had conducted a thorough review of Veronica's client relationships and presentation strategies, ultimately concluding that her approach was too focused on traditional corporate hierarchy and not sufficiently attuned to the collaborative, relationship-based approaches that clients were increasingly demanding. Her position as senior vice president was quietly eliminated during a, quote, strategic restructuring that reduced the firm's senior management team by 40%. Veronica had been forced to accept a significant demotion to account manager, with a corresponding reduction in salary and elimination of her partnership track position. Several industry contacts had told me that she was actively interviewing with other firms, but her reputation for character issues and strategic misjudgment was making it difficult for her to secure senior-level positions elsewhere. The professional community's perception of our respective careers had completely reversed. Where Veronica had once been celebrated as a rising star in corporate marketing, she was now viewed as someone who had failed to adapt to changing market conditions and had demonstrated poor judgment in client relationships. Meanwhile, I was being positioned as a thought leader who had identified and successfully implemented the marketing strategies that represented the future of business development. As I stood in the Fairmont Hotel ballroom, accepting congratulations from business leaders who had previously dismissed my work as amateur freelancing, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in just 6 weeks. The family dinner that was supposed to celebrate Veronica's greatest triumph had instead become the catalyst for my own professional transformation and her spectacular career collapse. But more than personal vindication, the evening represented validation of every choice I had made to prioritize authentic relationships over traditional markers of success. Every small business client I had served, every collaborative approach I had chosen over aggressive sales tactics, every community relationship I had built, instead of pursuing corporate networking opportunities, all of it had contributed to this moment of complete professional triumph. 2 years later, as I stood before a packed auditorium at the National Small Business Conference delivering the keynote address on authentic marketing in the digital age, I reflected on how completely my understanding of success, family, and purpose had been transformed. The woman speaking to an audience of entrepreneurs and business leaders bore little resemblance to the struggling freelance consultant who had sat at that family dinner, enduring her sister's public humiliation while having no idea that her life was about to change forever. My role as Vice President of Strategic Marketing at Meridian had evolved far beyond what anyone had initially envisioned. The Small Business Solutions division had become one of Meridian's fastest-growing and most profitable segments, with our authentic marketing approach driving acquisition success that exceeded every projection. We had acquired 12 technology companies in 18 months, and each integration had followed the relationship-based methodology that had made CloudVault so successful. But more than corporate success, my position had become a platform for transforming how businesses think about customer relationships and value creation. The marketing principles I had developed intuitively while working with small Denver businesses were now being implemented by companies across North America, creating a ripple effect that was changing industry standards and customer expectations. The conference presentation I was delivering that day included case studies from across our portfolio, showing how authentic marketing approaches had consistently outperformed traditional corporate strategies. A software company in Austin had achieved 300% growth in customer retention after implementing relationship-based customer service protocols. A manufacturing firm in Portland had reduced customer acquisition costs by 70% while doubling their average order values through educational content marketing that genuinely helped customers solve problems. The data was overwhelming and irrefutable. Companies that prioritized authentic relationships over aggressive sales tactics achieved superior long-term performance on every meaningful business metric. Customer lifetime value, retention rates, referral generation, brand loyalty, and organic growth all improved dramatically when businesses focused on creating genuine value rather than maximizing short-term revenue. As I concluded my presentation and opened the session for questions, I was struck by how different the business community's reception had become. 2 years earlier, many corporate executives had been skeptical of relationship-based marketing, viewing it as too time-intensive or insufficiently scalable for serious business applications. Now, authentic marketing was being recognized as a competitive advantage that could determine which companies would thrive in an increasingly relationship-driven economy. The questions from the audience reflected this transformation. CEOs wanted to know how they could restructure their organizations to prioritize customer relationships. Marketing directors asked about training programs that could help their teams develop authentic communication skills. Entrepreneurs sought advice about building businesses that could scale without losing their personal touch and community connections. But the most meaningful moment came during the reception following my presentation, when a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Ms. Rivera," she said, "I wanted to thank you for proving that you don't have to choose between being genuine and being successful. I've been running a small catering business for 3 years, and everyone keeps telling me I need to adopt more aggressive marketing tactics to compete with larger companies. Your story gives me hope that I can stay true to my values and still build something significant." Her words reminded me of the countless conversations I'd had with small business owners who felt pressured to abandon their authentic approaches in pursuit of traditional markers of success. The transformation of my own career had created a new narrative about what business success could look like, and that narrative was inspiring entrepreneurs to trust their instincts about relationship-based growth strategies. My personal relationships had undergone equally dramatic changes. The family dynamics that had once positioned Veronica as the success story and me as the cautionary tale had been completely reversed, but not in ways that brought me satisfaction or joy. Our parents, who had spent years celebrating Veronica's achievements while viewing my choices with loving concern, now struggled with guilt about how their perceptions had been so fundamentally wrong. "We're so proud of you, Mija," my mother had said during our last conversation, "but we're also sorry that we didn't understand what you were building all those years. We thought success had to look like Veronica's career, and we couldn't see the value in what you were creating." My father's apology had been even more direct. "Natalie, we failed you by measuring your worth against traditional corporate standards, instead of recognizing that you were developing something more valuable than any corporate position. Your success isn't just professional. It's proof that you understood something about business and relationships that the rest of us missed." But the most complex relationship to navigate had been with Veronica herself. In the 2 years since that disastrous family dinner, she had struggled to rebuild her career and her sense of professional identity. After leaving Preston and Associates, she had spent months interviewing with firms that were reluctant to hire someone associated with such a high-profile client relationship failure. Eventually, she had accepted a position with a smaller marketing firm in Phoenix, taking a significant step backward in terms of salary, responsibility, and professional prestige. Our interactions had been limited and carefully managed, with both of us recognizing that too much proximity too soon could be harmful for both our healing processes. But 6 months earlier, Veronica had reached out with a message that surprised me with its humility and self-awareness. "Natalie," she had written, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, and I'm not ready to have a conversation about what happened between us. But I want you to know that watching your success has taught me things about myself that I needed to learn. I built my entire identity around being better than other people instead of being better at helping other people. Your approach to business and relationships has shown me what I was missing, even when I was at the height of what I thought was success." She had continued, "I don't know if we'll ever have a normal sister relationship again, but I hope someday we can find a way to be family that doesn't require comparing our achievements or measuring our worth against each other. You've proven that there are many different ways to be successful, and maybe there's room for both of us to find our own paths." The letter had been a beginning rather than a resolution, but it represented the first acknowledgement from Veronica that her behavior had been wrong and that my approach to business and relationships had value that she had failed to recognize. Our parents had been cautiously optimistic about the possibility of eventual reconciliation, but I had learned not to rush emotional healing processes that needed time and space to develop naturally. My professional trajectory had also opened doors to opportunities I had never imagined. Harvard Business School had invited me to develop a case study about authentic marketing strategies for their MBA program. The World Economic Forum had asked me to participate in their annual conference panel on sustainable business practices. Publishers were courting me to write a book about relationship-based business development that could help other entrepreneurs apply these principles to their own companies. But perhaps the most fulfilling aspect of my transformation had been the opportunity to mentor other small business owners and freelance consultants who were building authentic relationship-based enterprises. Through Meridian's Small Business Solutions division, I had developed a consulting program that helped entrepreneurs understand how to scale their businesses without losing their personal touch or community connections. The entrepreneurs I worked with reminded me constantly of why authentic marketing approaches were so powerful. They cared deeply about their customers, understood their communities, and wanted to build businesses that created genuine value rather than just generating profit. My role had become helping them understand that those instincts weren't obstacles to serious business success, They were the foundation for the most sustainable and rewarding kind of growth. As I packed my materials after the conference and prepared to return to Denver, I reflected on how the woman boarding the plane bore little resemblance to the person who had sat at that family dinner 2 years earlier, listening to her sister call her broke, while having no idea that her life was about to change in the most dramatic way possible. The transformation hadn't just been professional or financial, it had been fundamental. I had learned that success didn't require choosing between authenticity and achievement, that relationships weren't obstacles to business growth, but rather the foundation for sustainable success, and that the skills I had developed while helping small businesses could create value on a scale I had never imagined. Most importantly, I had discovered that true success came not from comparing myself to others or meeting external expectations, but from using my talents and passions to create genuine value for the people and communities I cared about. The sister who had once called me broke had unknowingly catalyzed my discovery of a kind of wealth that went far beyond financial compensation. The wealth that comes from knowing your work matters, and that your authentic self is not just acceptable, but actually your greatest professional asset. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.